everyone, and I am back as we finish our first week of the spring 2021 semester here in Communication 100, Speech Communication. Let me just go ahead and go into detail about what I had said in my email this morning. Great speeches. I really enjoyed a lot of them. First, as you know, I hate online classes. So to be able to see you guys and to be able to listen to you, one of the things that I love about teaching is being able to learn who you are and what you're about and what your goals are and what you strive to do and what you love about life and everything else. And I saw a lot of that in this speech, and that's the purpose of it. It's an informal speech. It's to get you started. But what's more is one of the keys to public speaking is to make sure, and we'll talk more about this in detail when we get to the public speaking chapters, but is to know what you're talking about. And that's why for the informal speech, I give the opportunity to talk about something I think you know just a little bit about, and that, of course, is yourselves. And I think everybody did a really, really good job. I enjoyed listening to your speeches. I was surprised. I think there's about a dozen of you who are psychology majors. That they were very interesting speeches. But it was really interesting to listen to and to, watch you. Now, one of the things that's interesting about the time period, this unprecedented time period that we're in, and this particular course, is the fact that there are some things that are going to be changing from now on. Now, I'll give you a hint. I talk to business owners all the time. And any business owner will tell you if there's one thing they can't stand doing is paying money to lease office space. Well, since about almost a year ago, going back to March of 2020, when we started to have these lockdowns, there were people who say are waiters and waitresses in a restaurant, or maybe people who, clean or cleaning services. Well, those people, they were out of work. But those who are professionals, those like who you strive to be when you get your education and go out into the work field and get your career going, those people were still working. They were just working from home. And what you're seeing is that there's still a lot of productivity from professionals, people who are working and doing it online. And, you don't have to come into the offices often. And we already started to see that even pre-COVID. You might know some people. I know I do. I know some people who only go into work 3 days a week because they could stay at home and do it from a computer. Well, now they're home 5 days a week and they're still getting their work done. So you might see a serious, when we finally start getting to some kind of normalcy, in the sense that we won't be wearing masks anymore or anything like that, you might start to see a lot of real estate for lease signs on a lot of buildings, because a lot of office space is going to disappear. And what that means is that we're going to be doing a lot more of this. Whether you like it or not, we're going to probably do a lot more of this. So if you're working for a company and you have a presentation to make, you might be doing a lot more like this. So what some of you did see in my comments, in my notes, and they were just like, no worries, it's only the first informal speech. But for example, lighting. This is something I've been teaching public speaking since 1993. And up until this last spring semester where we had that, we went on spring break and then we didn't go back for spring break. So now students still had a formal speech to do, but now they had to do it online. We had to worry about lighting. I'd never had to worry about lighting before. But you want to make sure that the lighting is okay, so it's not too bright behind you. Like right now, my back door going into my kitchen, it might be a little too bright, or my face might be a little too bright. It looks okay the way I'm seeing it now, but these are the kind of things that we need to work on, because in the future, not only when you're working at a career position, but even when you interview for that position, you may be going ahead and doing it this way. It looks to me, all the indications look that in the future we're going to be doing a lot more of this, especially because people who own and run companies can't stand spending money to lease office space, especially when in their eyes they feel, well, we don't need it. So as we move forward and as we get ready for that first formal speech, which is still over a month away, we're going to work on those kind of things. So first, I do want you to stand because I still got to prepare you for speaking in, say, in front of an audience. Especially, for example, if you become a young parent and suddenly your town decides, well, we're not going to have full day kindergarten anymore. We're only going to have half day kindergarten, and you don't like that decision. Well, you get up and you go to your Board of Education and you get to speak. Well, you're going to be standing in front of an audience. So there are still those moments when you're going to do that. So I'm going to want you standing, but you're also still going to be by yourself with a camera in front of you. So we're going to practice. It's kind of like mixing both in the same kind. But I did like that a lot of you seemed pretty relaxed. And one more thing, which I don't mind, okay? If you have the headset with the microphone, that's fine. More than likely, in the future, if this is where a lot of your communication is going to be in your professional career, you want to not only hear what people are saying on the other end, but you want to make sure that your voice is clear. And if there was one thing I noticed, I'm not a gamer. I know mostly it's gamers. You're sitting there playing Call of Duty 55, and you're playing against some guy in Slovenia, and you're talking to him back and forth. But it does come through clear. Your voice came through nice and clear. So if you do have those and you use those with your speeches, I'm not going to be upset about it because as long as we're able to hear you. Oh, and by the way, thank you so much for those of you who did put okay in your subject line. I got so overwhelmed, and one of the reasons why we're starting a little late today, I got so overwhelmed with the last second entries. Quite a few of your classmates waited until last night at 8 o'clock or a little after 8 to submit their speeches, and I just got so overwhelmed that I didn't get a chance to put some together. But I wish some of you could really see some. There were some really good speeches. I really enjoyed them. But now it's time to move on to chapter 1. And what is communication? Okay? Now, if you ask my niece, she'll hold up her cell phone. Oh, Michael, this is communication. Well, to a certain point, she's correct. But, pretty much communication is anything where information is not only sent, received, but also understood. Making sure your communication or whatever message that you're sending or receiving is understood, that's the key to communication. And it could be vocal, okay? You could say, hey, put that down. All right, the person hears that. Whatever they're holding, they put down. Even for a dog. I tell my dog's now laying behind me. I tell it, put that down. He drops it, okay? But it could also be non-vocal. All right. Yeah. Remember, when you thought you were still cool when you were 17, and you decided to break curfew, and you come into the house about an hour and a half late. You still got that little buzz on you, and you think you're sneaking in the house, but you're making so much noise half the neighborhood hears you. So when you finally close the door and you turn around, and your father's standing there like this. Now, he doesn't have to say a word, but you think the message is pretty clear? Absolutely. Absolutely. You hand him over the keys to the car. You're not driving for a month. And then you slink your way up the stairs and you go to your room. So, again, as long as the message is sent, received, and understood, that's communication. Now, in Chapter 1, they talk about some of the different type of communication. Okay? Ta-da! Let's go over some of these. There's intrapersonal. Now, intra is my favorite because intra is that communication within oneself. For example, as you opened up your email last Thursday, and suddenly this little fat Italian is going off of, I'm 60% Italian. This little fat Italian's going off about, hey, Com-100, we're going to have it. And of course, what are you saying to yourself? So this is the guy? Man, he's got a lot of energy. Look at all that gray hair. And this is all, you're not saying it vocally, but it's all going on up here. And we communicate so much inside of our head. And after a while, because we've been doing it ever since the day we were born, we're able to understand quickly what we're communicating to ourselves. So that's why we can rapidly think a lot faster than we can say, actually vocally say it or even write it down. And then there's interpersonal. Now, interpersonal is between you and another person. So you now have to make adjustments. See, communicating with oneself, I understand what I'm saying to myself, but now I have to communicate with another person. And you want to make sure that when you communicate your message to the other person, they're not like, what? Huh? What? You want to make sure it's perfectly clear. Same thing with group or small group. I like to keep small group between 5 and 7 people, and we'll talk about that when we get to the group chapter. You want to make sure that each and every person in that group understands what you're saying the one time you say it. So you have to make adjustments. And what I mean by adjustments, we are a very diverse campus here at Bergen. We have tons of different people from all different walks of life. But what's more is that we have people who are arriving from around the world. We're in the New York City area. So when people immigrate to the United States, they're coming, this is one of the biggest places they come to is our area. So you may have, and I've had this so many times when we do the group project in class, where I have a 35-year-old who's from Brazil, okay, just got here from Sao Paulo. And I'll have a 24-year-old who's from South Korea. And I'll actually have a 41-year-old doctor from Malaysia, okay? And then I'll have this 21-year-old from Albania. And then there'll be this 19-year-old kid who was born and raised in Lodi. And of course, this kid is now talking to the rest of his group members as if he's talking to his best friends at home in Lodi. Well, you can imagine a lot of these other people are not understanding what this kid is saying. So you want to make sure those adjustments are made so that everyone understands what you have to say. And then there's public communication. Now, giving a speech would be an example of public communication. Giving a speech to an audience, to a class. Even what I'm doing right now would be considered public because there's so many of you, at least more than 5 or 10. And you want to make those adjustments. I mean, I could stand up here. I've had the same 3 best friends since I'm 15 years old. And I could stand up here and talk with you the same way I talk with them. If I did, half of you would get completely lost. The other half would look at me and say, yo, dude, get out of the 80s. But otherwise, there'd be a lot of jargon, a lot of slang terms that would be used, a lot of references to stuff that a lot of you wouldn't understand, but of course they would. So even speaking about Chapter 1, I have to make my adjustments so that you all understand what I'm saying the one time I say it. And then finally, there's mass communication. That's when you're talking to such a large audience that it's very difficult, if almost impossible, to get any kind of immediate feedback. So you want to make sure that you're getting that word out there. As a matter of fact, besides the besides Com-100, which is speech, what we are, I also teach Com-101, which is Intro to Mass Media. Well, several years ago, I took my mass media class into Manhattan to watch a taping of an ESPN show that starred Stephen A. Smith. Some of you who know ESPN know who Stephen A. Smith is. And he had started out as a sports writer. He wrote about NBA basketball. He then became a guest on a lot of ESPN talk shows. He then was starting to get his own talk show on ESPN, which he still does. The one he has now was not the one that we went to. He actually had a late night show that would air every weeknight at 11 p.m. on ESPN2. So it would tape in the afternoon and then air that night. So I had about 25 students there, and it was great because I asked, we watched the taping of the show. All the other audience members were escorted out. We got to stay for a private Q&A. I thought that was so cool. So there's 25 of us from Bergen standing there, and Stephen A. says, okay, who's got the first question? Well, 25 students from Bergen Community College. So I said, all right, Stephen, I'll ask the first question. I said, we talk about all the different type of mass media. I says, in your career, where do you put the most effort? Now, at the time, Stephen was not only doing the TV show in this multi-million-dollar studio in Midtown Manhattan, he was also doing the radio show on ESPN Radio, and he was still writing his column, because he originally started in Philadelphia at a newspaper there, writing a column that was now syndicated nationally. And Stephen said, oh, without a doubt, the most attention I pay, the most effort I put into is the newspaper column. Now, a couple of students started to chuckle, and I can understand why, because we were in a multi-million-dollar show. We had 70-inch flat screens were falling from the sky with people on them that he was interviewing. It was really cool. But then he said, no, you don't understand. And he said to the students, he says, listen, if I say something on the TV show and let's say people don't understand me, well, the director could say, cut, Steven, let's reshoot that, but just explain what you mean. If he says something on the radio show and people don't understand, well, they can call in and say, hey, Steven, this is Charlie from Bayside. What'd you just say? He said, but once my words go into print, whether it's a 35-year-old in Bangor, Maine, a 61-year-old in San Antonio, Texas, or a 13-year-old in Portland, Oregon, whoever picks up that newspaper and reads my column must understand what I'm saying the one time they say it. Otherwise, he says, I wake up the next morning and there's 400 phone messages on my phone from 400 newspaper editors across the country, all saying the same thing. Steven, what the hell were you talking about? So I thought that was great, and it was great meeting Stephen A. Smith, and I got a nice autograph from him, so that was cool. So now let's move on to communication. Now, in your textbook, there are all kinds of different communication models. But I gave you, attached to your email, is the interactive model. And the interactive model is pretty simple to follow. As you can see, it's pretty simple. You've got a sender who sends a message to a receiver. The receiver then assigns some meaning to that message and sends feedback to the sender. And if the communication is successful, then the communication is both successful and satisfactory. Now, that's easy. Let's say we were in a classroom right now, and I started to lecture, and you realize you showed up at a college classroom without something to write with. So you go look left, you look over here. Listen, you got an extra pen I could borrow? Usually, without saying a word, that person reaches into their bag and pulls out an extra pen. Now, the beauty part is that not only did they make some sense of what you were saying, right here, the receiver, but before they even touched the pen, they're sending you the feedback you're looking for. They understood what you said because they're now reaching in to go grab that pen. So even before their fingers touch the pen, you receive the feedback you're looking for. The communication is both successful and satisfactory. But as you see on the attachment that I sent you, unfortunately sometimes the squiggly lines get in the way. And what the squiggly lines represent is anything that disrupts the sharing of meaning is called noise. God, that's a horrible... Look at that. I can't even do an O. My mother would not be proud. Anything that disrupts the sharing of meaning is noise. Now, there's several different types of noise. Okay? The first type, of course, is what you would typically think of physical noise. Okay? If there's like something is banging, okay, and you can't hear what's being said, yeah, there'd be physical noise. But now, a physical noise, remember, anything that disrupts the sharing of meaning is noise. And physical noise can comprise a lot of different things. For example, let me give you a scenario here. Little Billy, 14 years old, comes home from school. He immediately runs upstairs, slams his door, starts cranking his stereo. Billy loves Nickelback. He's the only kid left in his whole county who loves Nickelback, and he don't care. He's blasting it. So now his mother downstairs hears that he's home, so she goes up the stairs. She says, Billy, come down here and take out the garbage. No answer. Billy, come down here and take out the garbage. Nothing. Billy, come down here and take out the garbage. Nada. Billy, come down here and take out the garbage. Zero. So now, of course, she goes upstairs. She bangs on the door. She says, and he opens up the door. He says, what are you banging on my door for? She says, well, I've been calling you for the next 10 minutes. Well, I didn't hear you. And you suddenly have this rise in tension and this conflict created simply because one or the other failed to remove the physical noise. Now, hold on to that story because we're going to refer back to that. Now, another type of noise is psychological noise. Okay? Now, psychological noise, unlike physical, doesn't happen on the outside. Psychological noise all happens right up in here. So there might not be a physical sound going on the outside, but the psychological up here could completely disrupt the sharing of meaning. I'll give you an example. How many of you have ever tried to speak with someone the very next day after they've been dumped by their boyfriend or girlfriend? There's nothing. There's so much going on here, okay? You could look them in the face and say, are you okay? Or let's go do this. Or, hey, I'll come back and we'll go get some ice cream. And you'll be like, okay. They'll come back and say, hey, you ready to go? And you're like, go where? Because whatever they're saying, what's blocking up here is either A, how could that person do this to me after everything I've done for them? Or B, how can I slash their tires without them knowing it's me? But otherwise, things are not registering. Now, the third type of noise they talk about is physiological noise. Now, for my science majors, what's physiological noise? Especially some of you are nursing majors. Yes, that's when the body gets involved, okay? So, for example, especially come around March or April when we're in the spring semester, I love when students start coming in because, March or April, it's starting to spring and the flowers and the trees and everything's starting to bloom, and that means allergy season. And students will show up to class. I can't make this up because it's so funny. It happened like every semester. Students will show up like, and you can see there's like this huge, like softball-sized ball of snot in their sinus cavity, and they're like, I didn't want to miss your class, but I know I'm not feeling good. I got allergies and I can't breathe. I'll just sit down. I won't make any noise. And so they sit down, and you can tell they're not paying attention to anything I say. They can't, because all you hear is, I can't breathe. I just want to breathe. Or you ever try to talk to somebody immediately after they stub their toe? Okay. Hey, what's going on? Oh. Now say something to them important. It ain't happening. Or my favorite is when you try to stop somebody in the hallway and they really need to go to the bathroom. Yeah, they're not going to be listening to anything you say. And if you say something to them, they're not going to remember. Because it's like, I just had a 24 ounce and I got to go to the bathroom. I sat through the entire class without getting up. I got to go. And they're not going to listen to anything you say. They just have to go. And that's all physiological noise. All right, so you have your assignment sheet there. And as you can see, the first part of the assignment sheet has to deal with 3 types of physical noise in the Billy scenario. And then I want you to document for me 3 times where 1, physical noise disrupted something in your life, psychological noise disrupted something, and physiological noise disrupted something. Just follow the assignment sheet. All right? That's your assignment. It is due on Monday at 8 p.m. All right? Guys, have a great weekend, and we'll see you Tuesday morning.